Hi, I have with me today Yotam Segev, who's with Cyera. And Yotam, I'm really excited to have you on. We're going to talk a lot about data security, but I'd love for you to just take a second to introduce yourself and give a little bit on your background.
Thank you, Doreen. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I'm excited for the conversation as well. I'm Yotam. I'm the co-founder and CEO for Cyera, and the leader in DSPM, Data Security Posture Management. My background is from the Israeli military, cyber intelligence, and Telpiot, Israel's elite technological leadership academy. That's where I had the pleasure of meeting my co-founder and partner in the company, Tamar. And we've been working in cybersecurity side by side for over almost 14 years now. I've done a lot, both on the defense sector and in the last several years as Cyera, tackling the biggest challenges in data security. Based in New York, originally from Israel, as you can tell by the accent,
Yeah.
and a pleasure to be here.
Well, welcome. And I had the pleasure of meeting Tamar last week. So it's good to now get a chance to meet both of you. And so you mentioned obviously data security. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So I had a roundtable, I think it was last week, with a group of 8 CISOs, and we were focused on data that's moving through the cloud and how they're securing it. And we heard a lot from them in terms of the challenges they're facing. And they were numerous, right? So we heard a lot about scattered data and things that different areas of the business are doing that they don't have visibility into. We heard from healthcare CISOs a lot about integrity of data and how critical that is. And then we heard about organizations who have now data scientists who are doing things and needing that business intelligence, but that the cybersecurity professionals, while they don't own that, they really need to be step by step and side by side with them as they go through it. So one other thing to note is I had a fireside chat with Emily Heath, who you may know as the former CISO of United Airlines. And she was talking about back when she was a CISO, everything had to be done manually. And as you know, manual leads to errors. It's really not very efficient. So she was blown away by how the industry has changed and the tools that are available today. So I'm going to be quiet for a minute and let you sort of take over with what you're hearing as it relates to challenges for data security and how, because that is by far their most valuable asset, right?
For sure. So I think the market today, practitioners at large, the greatest challenge is getting a hold of what we have. Just doing the basic, the 101 of cybersecurity in every domain of cybersecurity, which is an inventory. What data do we have? What data is sensitive? And where does that data reside and live across our enterprise? It sounds so fundamental, but most enterprises struggle achieving that first level, that first milestone in the data program, in the data security program. And the reason is actually quite obvious. The amounts of data that are being collected, that are being generated across different business units for different users is so vast, and it's growing so fast that without automatic tools and without leveraging the latest and greatest that technology has to offer, in this sense, machine learning and AI, it's almost impossible to get a hold of these unimaginable amounts of data that are being generated and collected. I think it's not that long ago that the best way to move data around was a floppy disk. All of us remember the floppy disk. That was
That
the best
ages
we had.
that ages us. We can't admit.
I'm pretty young, and I used to work with a floppy disk. And today, 2 clicks of a button, you can replicate hundreds of terabytes, even petabytes of data across the world, across systems. Yeah, the world of data has changed tremendously. And when we look at the latest trends this past year, generative AI, rocking the boat, firing everybody up, getting everyone excited, but also a bit scared. I
Yeah.
think that the importance of being able to differentiate between what data is proprietary to our enterprise, what data do we not want to find in some Gen AI service out there in the internet, servicing other organizations or exposing us to legal or compliance risk, the need to be able to differentiate between the data that matters and the data that clutters is greater than ever before.
Yeah, and we hear a lot about that. And even when Emily spoke with us, she talked about that discovery being that first piece, right? And in the conversation I had with CISOs, not just last week's roundtable, we have these discussions all the time. They don't know their data, right? And it's not for a lack of effort, but as we talked about, different business units are taking on new initiatives, not always running it through the security department. And so it makes it really challenging to get a hold of what's out there. And to your point, that's the first step. Before you get to the point where how are you classifying or tagging it, how are you controlling it, you need to know what's there. So tell me a little bit about the solutions that are available today as it relates to that. Like, what are the steps when you have something in place, like a DSPM, like a Cyera, of course, that's going to help you have that visibility into what the data is?
So I think the first step is really getting to a place where you have monitoring over the different data stores, data environments across your enterprise. Many different ecosystems, types of environments that are being used across the enterprise space, and essentially compose the main data backbones of the enterprise. So you have unstructured data, which resides primarily in Office 365, sometimes in Google Drive, but also in other places. You have structured data across your databases. You have blob storage, S3 buckets, Azure blob storage that are popping up today and containing vast amounts of data. You have the modern data lake technologies, Snowflake, Databricks, MongoDB, and these are just to name a few. There are many other systems that have become huge data warehouses, huge data ecosystems for the enterprise. And just being able to plug in all of those systems to monitor what's going on inside of them, what data lives there, that's the initial challenge. Traditional technologies operated over the network. You had to connect at the network level to each and every database across your data center. Today, with the cloud, agentless API-driven solutions allow you to connect once to the hypervisor, to the cloud provider that's below, one layer below the data stores themselves, and get access to all of the data stores through that. That is a huge shortcut to deploying and getting connection into the data and getting visibility into the data in all of those data stores. It allows you to shortcut the processes that used to take years, had to penetrate networks, and had to aggravate a lot of DBAs by scanning their production databases. They never like that. All of that is not required today with API-based solutions like DSPM. On top of that is the classification itself, and the classification serves two purposes. The first one is you actually want to inventory all the data you have, but the second one is you want to be able to identify your crown jewels. Now, the only way organizations are able to identify crown jewels today is by doing an organizational process, having a conversation with each and every business unit, and trying to get out of them the answer. What data matters to your business unit? What data must we protect? That's not such an easy question to ask the business units. It's not like they know.
Yeah.
They're really trying to give us the best answer they can, but oftentimes they don't really know what data exists in their business unit as well. And with tools that are able to automatically discover and contextualize data, that conversation can be based on findings. We can have that conversation on top of, here's what we see you have. Here's what we think is important. Can you validate that? Are we making should we make any changes to that? And this is truly a way to accelerate this crown jewel identification process that is so difficult for big enterprises with numerous business units and so many different things happening within them.
And I mentioned obviously that, manual classification and tagging is inefficient, but the truth is, and we heard this as well, it doesn't work. When you ask, staff to tag data, there's a variety of issues that happen. One, they tag it wrong, they take shortcuts, right? There's so many things. And when you're dealing with privacy issues, and there's a variety of different levels, to your point, the crown jewel of data, and there, it's not tagged properly, the vulnerabilities are significant. So how does DSPM jump in there and help with that process?
Yeah. So really being able to understand the data, contextualize it, and tag it That's the basic layer. That's the core of what DSPMs do well. Being able to consume vast environments. We're talking about big data is a term that is 30 years old. Big data today has gotten so much bigger than what we thought about when we talked about big data back in the day. So really the ability to consume those vast amounts of data that are being collected in enterprises and help the enterprise understand what they are automatically in a way that a regular analyst in the security organization will be able to understand. That's the heart of it. That's the core of the product. After you do that, other questions arise. Who can access the data? Who has access to the data? Is the data in the right geolocation? Is it encrypted like it should be? Is it available on the internet? Is it publicly accessible? We don't want that. All sorts of questions, some of them more compliance focused, some of them more security focused, and touching the different aspects around the data that become the next layer. Is the data at risk? Are we keeping it like we should? And the last layer, which is the most important one maybe today, is what do we do about it? Because CISOs are tired of solutions lighting up the Christmas tree with more and more and more lights, more alerts. But how do I actually solve these problems? How do I actually get to a solution? And that's where DSPMs and any other modern security products have to be able to close the loops on these issues and not just raise awareness. We want the ability to solve, to remediate, and not just the ability to discover.
So it's interesting you talk about the alerts and the Christmas tree, if you will, right? So we did do a report earlier this year on CISO burnout, and that's no surprise, right? But one of the biggest issues with CISO burnout is that alert fatigue. Well, not just at the CISO level, every level. So what I'm hearing from you is with solutions like this, you're reducing those alerts and that fatigue that comes along with it, correct?
I would even add to that and say more than that. When you look at the security ecosystem today, security stack, there are so many tools that are doing amazing things for us. When you add DSPM to the mix, you're not just getting another tool, another ability to detect more things. You're also adding data context to all of the existing findings you have, to all of the existing processes you have. Today, when we're analyzing many of the security alerts in our SOC, we have no idea what the data impact of those alerts are. If we get user account takeover alerts, let's say we have 100 a day, and we can only investigate 10 because that's the resources we have. How do we choose those 10 today? We don't know which of those user accounts can potentially access the most sensitive data in the organization and which can't access much at all. The only thing we know is the likelihood of the user account takeover to have been successful according to the algorithms that are assessing that. Cyera and other DSPM products need to add the data impact context, the data context to all of the processes and systems that we already have in place. Security has to go to a place where 1 + 1 = 3. Like we have to get more out of the added tooling and the added investments we're making than we got from the original investments. Otherwise, we're just not going to win. So for us, integrations, open API, being able to plug in and complement many of the efforts and many of the processes that are already in place is a crucial part of our value offering.
So I have two other questions that come to mind. And one is around zero trust, right? So in the conversation we had last week, one of the CISOs said, look, we just started, down the path last year of zero trust network access. We thought that was going to help, but the reality is it's not touching the data. It's really not solving our problem as it relates to data. Tell me a little bit about how DSPM sort of play into ZTNA.
So ZTNA as an architecture, as a concept, is all about being able to assess every transaction and the risk associated with it and decide if it looks legitimate or there's risk involved in it. At the heart of that is the data pillar, a pillar which not many organizations have been able to tackle in the past because the only technical tooling we had was DLP. DLP was really great at catching the data as it's leaving our environment, but it wasn't all that good about telling us what we have in the first place.
Yeah.
I think that the focus has shifted. I think the DLP of the future, data protection of the future, and the future I mean now, that is much more about being able to understand what data we have in our enterprise and how that data is being used. And oftentimes the remediation is education, it's awareness. It's not always blocking or preventing. Sometimes it's the ability to reach out to a group of developers that are working on an app and say, hey, we see that you're collecting social security numbers from our customers. We weren't aware that we have that information. Why are you doing this? Is this required? Is it necessary? If so, maybe we need to up the security standards around that app. But if not, then we don't want that information. It's not always just about being able to block things, but to understand them and to have a much more meaningful conversation with our business and IT counterparts in order to really protect the organization and the services we provide.
And that is the key. The knowledge and the visibility makes a tremendous difference. So the last question that comes to mind relates to sort of accessing solutions. So one of the things we hear a lot is administrative nightmares when they bring in a new security solution. And so they may see the value in the solution. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. But now how am I going to manage that, right? So for DSPMs, how does that look for an organization?
So I think that for us in the DSPM space, we're trying to make sure that the precious resources our customers have are used at the highest level of the value chain. What do I mean by that? When you look at the process of getting value from a security tool, right? I don't want my customers having to spend any time on the deployment. That's table stakes. They don't get anything from that. I want the deployment to be as easy as possible, automated. That's why we invested in agentless API-driven deployment. I don't want my customers to be busy with pre-configuration. They are paying me for the product. The product has to deliver value from the first minute it's connected. The product has to come with rich out-of-the-box policies, with capabilities. Of course, every enterprise would like to fine-tune those and fit them to their exact needs. That's natural, but I want that to be a higher level of the value chain. So for us, we'd like our customers to be focused on driving remediation through the enterprise, taking care of big problems, being able to report on risk on a holistic level to the board and to the leadership of the company. And everything else has to be automated, has to work out of the box. That's the experience that is relevant in 2023, or should I almost say 2024, which is coming up almost upon us.
Any minute, yeah.
And I haven't met a cybersecurity organization that told me that they have resources. They have people lying around doing nothing, just looking for something to do, a way to contribute. Everybody is slammed. Everybody is stretched thin. So if you want to be relevant as a product company like us, you have to make it extremely easy and so accessible to consume your value and consume your value offering. And I'll add more than that. The value has to go way beyond security. CISOs today are not looking to do just the right thing for security. They're looking to do the right thing for the enterprise. They're looking to push the enterprise forward. And when I look at what Cyera has to offer and what Cyera is offering our customers, the implications have huge value to other peers and stakeholders within the enterprise. The chief data officer, the chief privacy officer, the chief legal officer for e-discovery, the CIO that is worried about the cloud bill that is growing 50 to 100% year over year. And part of that is just data that is lying around, collecting dust. Nobody's using it. Nobody knows it's there. We can remove it and reduce cost and reduce risk. So a lot of the value proposition goes wider than security. Security is our main stakeholder, our champions, because we're focused on protecting the data more than anything else. But they have a lot to give their peers and to give the ecosystem around them in order to help create excitement and partnership and collaboration within the enterprise.
It is very refreshing to hear your take on that. And I would agree 100% that CISOs and other security professionals today are responsible for so much more as it relates to moving the business forward. We're hearing a lot about trust and value assurance and safety and all of those things line up into your solution from what I'm hearing, because having that visibility and knowledge about the data creates that trust, not just for the organization internally, but for their customers as well. And that's a critical part of doing business. So it's good to hear all that. Before we wrap up, anything that you wanted to add that maybe I didn't ask you about or we didn't touch on?
I think the last thing, and generative AI, in my mind, is creating a huge wave, maybe a new digital transformation, the AI transformation that is going to be upon us in the next few years. And who can even imagine how big the changes we're going to see are? I think that the need, the urgency to put data in its rightful place as a first-class citizen within the enterprise, within our security programs, the need is so dire. And I think that companies that won't step up to the plate in that regard and won't do something about it today might find themselves in a very, very challenging situation within a year or 2 years as AI continues to accelerate and change the way we operate. The easiest example we're seeing right now is with Microsoft Copilot. Yeah. Everybody wants to try this technology. Everyone wants to leverage this technology. Nobody is able to assess what data will become accessible in their Office 365 tenant. What are they opening up there? And if we don't do something about it now, we're going to be almost too late. And I really urge CISOs and security leaders to invest in data security, to invest in understanding what data means the most to their enterprises, to make sure that they're going into this new age and giving their enterprise the chance to compete, the chance to win in the new world.
It's all about being proactive, right? Knowing what is coming down the pipe and what is happening right now and getting ahead of it so that you're not looking back thinking, wow, like, why didn't we take action when we could have? And unfortunately, we see that happen with a lot of organizations and it's too late. So great information. I appreciate you taking time to chat with me. I appreciate having Cyera as one of our partners. We obviously believe in the product, hence the reason we enjoy these discussions and bringing you to market with our audience. And I'm sure they're going to get a lot of information that they needed out of this conversation. So thank you.
Thank you, Doreen. It's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you.